The first red signal is like any sort of exaggeration or lying. Cost of living in Silicon Valley is mind-blowing for people. People would be surprised, but a sandwich costs $20. Your average roti dal in India costs you $1. So there's a 20x difference. Just don't use the AI. Yeah, they really, companies don't like it. The US is paying almost double what the average PM in Europe is making. And the average PM in Europe is often making double India. 5 years ago, I wanted more than anything to be a PM. So now that I'm the PM, I do have to pay the tax of being a PM and have to respond to Slack messages on vacation. That's life as a PM. I'm sorry, guys. If this doesn't sound appealing to you, find another job.
One of the feedback which we often get from all the team members or the managers is you have to be more strategic. Let's keep moving to the next segment of our video, which is, okay, now you are a product manager working in a company. How do you think about your growth career? And how do you grow in your existing PM roles? What are some of the tips, Akash, existing PM, senior PM should always keep in mind while working in their career?
So I would bucket this into 3 areas I'm going to talk about, okay? So one is content management, one is burnout management, and then one is feedback review. And actually, 1 is less important than 2 is less important than 3. So content, this is where people might expect me to start. So that's why I'm going to start there. Improve your content diet. When you have 30 minutes before bed, are you watching Netflix or are you doing something useful like watching Sugat's YouTube channel? There's ways for you to build compounding learning vis-a-vis others. Product management, compared to every other field, has the highest density of content. There are so many good content creators. The engineering field is 10 times larger, but there are less content creators about engineering somehow. So you happen to be in product management in the one field where there's just too many content creators out there. So consume that content. If you don't like Sugat's YouTube channel, why are you watching this video? But if you still don't like it and you've somehow been watching this video, check out Reforge. Maybe you want that very high quality stuff, the $2,000 per course stuff. Maybe you want to check out Lenny's newsletter. Maybe you want to check out Shreyas Doshi's paid Twitter subscriptions. There's so many amazing resources out there. And you want to make sure that in those extra time, you're developing a competitive advantage vis-a-vis the other PMs at your level. As I said before, this is a hard job. It's really worth you building into your life a good content diet. And what's the number one trick for good content diet? The unfollow button. As soon as somebody puts some BS in your feed, give them a good, heavy unfollow. You know what? You can always follow them back if you see some good content that the algorithmic feed gives back to you. But I unfollow at least one person a day. I probably follow like 10, but then I go through and I also unfollow those people who are putting the stuff in my feed that I don't need. If you tweet about Trump, you're getting unfollowed because I just don't have time for that. So content management, that's number 1. Burnout management, that's number 2. Let's be honest, if you want to succeed in this job, you're going to end up getting requests from your boss to write a product strategy document overnight, from your designer to help with some questions on a Figma file while you had deep work blocked to write a PRD. It is not a 40-hour. It is not. So don't treat it like a 40-hour a week job, but instead create this work-life integration where after you put your son to sleep at 9 o'clock, normally you would go watch Netflix with your wife, but you set a deal with your wife. I will be there in 45 minutes. And then you really carefully use your 45 minutes to work ahead. But make sure that you do have that integration where you're not missing your son's soccer practice. You're not missing your dad. Someone has missed their dad's funeral. This was written on Reddit. Don't do that, guys. Your life matters 100 million times more, and it'll cause you to burn out if you start doing that. Similarly, try not to cut sleep. I'm one to talk because I did sleep for like 4 hours for many years, but it's generally not, it was a way for me to create burnout. When I would go on vacation, I just couldn't do anything related to work, which also is a mistake, guys. Unfortunately, PM is not a job where you can just go take vacation for 1 week and not respond to your Slack and email. I'm so sorry, but you do have to spend 30 minutes every day on that stupid laptop. It's horrible, but that's why it's all about burnout management. How do you reframe this to say, 5 years ago, I wanted more than anything to be a PM. So now that I'm the PM, I do have to pay the tax of being a PM and have to respond to Slack messages on vacation. That's life as a PM. I'm sorry, guys. If this doesn't sound appealing to you, find another job. And then the third thing, and this is actually the most important, everybody focuses on those first two, is feedback management. As a PM, you get too much feedback. Let's be honest. It's hard. It was hard for me, especially if you're doing a good job, asking your design partner, asking your engineers, asking your VPs, asking your skip level and your skip level. If you work at a place like Meta, what is their feedback for you? And then you should also be using your manager for this. Every 2 to 3 weeks, you should be proactively saying, hey, you told me in last cycle, don't wait for the next cycle, by the way. You told me in last cycle, I could do better with some PRD detail. Here are 2 PRDs that are really detailed. I just want to spend this one-on-one 30 minutes reviewing how I did on those PRDs. And maybe, that was one of 5 areas of feedback she had for you. So next week, another area of feedback you told me was that, my design partners don't like me quite as much as the other PMs. So I just want to go through some recent interactions and kind of reevaluate, did I handle this well? So let's pull up Figma and let's look at how I responded to some of the questions my designer had in Figma. Do you think I could have done better with that, right? So use your manager to create progress against all of your last performance cycle feedback. Most people, they let them one-on-one become about projects. I say make it about skills. Make it about feedback management. Proactively come to them with, okay, this is what we're going to talk about today. That's it. And then you want updates on your projects? Well, okay, I'll just email those to you half an hour before the one-on-one. So that's how you really create progress against your feedback development areas. And never expect that you're going to have all positive feedback as a PM. The reason it is so well paid is because so many people have an opinion about what you're doing. So people are always going to have a negative opinion. Take it in stride when we go back to the burnout management piece and just keep improving.
Absolutely. Being a PM, especially in the early careers or mid careers, right? One of the feedback which we often get from all the team members or the managers is you have to be more strategic. How do you define that being more strategic? And hopefully people watching this can learn something to deal with this kind of situations.
So I had many PMs. I told you I managed over 100 PMs who are under me, who maybe even I didn't give the strategic feedback, although sometimes I did. Most often, it would come from my boss, my skip level, that I want to see Sugat being more strategic. Then I would say, okay, well, tell me more a little bit about that. And sometimes the response that you'll get from those people is different. So be very careful to listen to the specifics. A lot of times, frankly, it comes down to how you portrayed yourself in the meetings with that skip level. So a lot of times it comes down to push back. A lot of people on my team, if my boss said something to them, they said, okay. And then they rushed to do that. The people who didn't get any feedback about being strategic, when my boss said something, they would say, well, in customer discovery, I learned this, this, and this. And they would be willing to educate the boss with new insights. And what you need to realize is that the currency of executives is insight. So if you can make the meetings with them, teaching them new insights, when they have to go talk to their senior leaders, they're sharing the insights you taught them. And then they start to think you're strategic. So that to me was by far the most common thing, is push back against executives in meetings that you have them when you have done the work. Sometimes executives will just ask a brilliant question. Have you thought about this user group? Shoot, you guys totally forgot about that user group. Now, the way to handle that is not, executive, we forgot this user group. You're so smart. No, it's more like, that's a great point. We're going to follow up. And then in 2 days, follow up with a strategic response. I went and I keep 5 people in this user group on speed dial. I called them. I talked to them. I texted 3 others this mock-up that I sketched. Here's the results. Then they say, oh my God, this guy's going, talking to customers, creating sketches, putting them in front of them. It's not like a simple, I just went to Amplitude and I looked at their performance, right? You went and you actually did some real work. And again, you generated insights for them that they can go share with their boss. So that to me is if you would say addressing 50% of the feed is learning how to push back against executives, because they tend to be the driver of this advice that you're not being strategic. The next 25% is stop doing your job What? Yes. Do your boss's job. This is very, very important feedback for everybody. Okay. So let's say I'm a group product manager and I am leading up whole of growth. So I have a PM on activation. A PM who's getting feedback on activation that they're not strategic, they might be writing the world's best strategy document on activation. But are they thinking about whether we should even focus on activation anymore? Maybe we hit diminishing returns on the activation. Are they thinking about what their peers are doing in expansion, in pricing and packaging and saying, there's more impact over there. Maybe we should reorganize the team so that we have 2 pricing and packaging teams, no activation team. Questioning whether your area should exist is one of the best things to do. Thinking about what the structure of all the reports to your boss should be. Should your boss even exist? Should there even be a growth team? Maybe you guys should all go to core. Maybe all the impact is over there, right? Try to write a strategy document for your boss. Try to think and act like your boss. When you go into these conversations, do some of their job for them. That's the second way. That's the next 25%. The final 25% is the specific feedback you got. Some people, their strategy documents weren't good enough. That's why they were so strategic. Although, again, I think it's only 25% of cases that's actually true. Some people, they are not doing a good enough job looking at the metrics. So they get a feature and they just look at the metrics that the exec wanted about the feature. Being strategic means thinking, downstream impact 3 teams ago, if we move this activation and we activate more people, maybe the retention is going to be worse and that's going to hurt the retention group. So I'm going to think about those retention guardrail metrics. It's thinking about the whole system and what the impacts are. So those I would think are the biggest buckets of not being strategic.
Awesome. I think folks watching this again, I hope you will all try to make some sense on what does strategic mean and how can you work on this kind of feedback, which is actually, I think so many of people have heard about it. Have heard of this feedback in their career some or the other point of the time. Cool. Being a PM, one of the another interesting job or things is get the things done, influence people, and get the leadership buy-in. Do you want to throw any lights? What are some of the best practices of getting the leadership buy-ins in any of the initiatives or projects that you're working on?
Leadership buy-in starts with planning, continues with product reviews, and ends with results. So with planning, here's the reality. You need to do planning before planning starts. The very, very people who are succeeding in planning, they basically have all the planning artifacts done the day the team itself execs say, this is how we're doing planning. And oftentimes they're doing next level 3D chess. They're going to the exec's house. This is a very, very, very good technique to do. Going to their manager's house in person after work for dinner where they talk about their plans. You should think about the planning cycle that they actually give you, that 3-week quarterly planning cycle, is refining with them what you have already prepared. So you need to have the data insights, the discovery insights, the user research, the summary of everything that worked the last quarter, even though you're only 60% of the way through the quarter, ready. So that's what I always tell people is do the planning before the planning so that during the planning, you're focused on getting all these people on board and you're shifting towards their feedback. Planning's number 1. Number 2 is these product reviews. I talked a little bit about them. Pushback is one element. A much better element is actually doing them. Some of you guys are skipping your product reviews. If you have an important big rock feature that execs were interested in, but maybe there's not a product review slot on their schedule or their calendar looks triple booked or they didn't ask you, go tell them anyway. Go reach out to their EA anyways and say, you know what? Aakash really, really cared about what the invite modal looked like. So I want to make sure to have 45 minutes with him right at the point where my designer has finished their work, but they have one more day to incorporate his feedback. So can we please get a meeting for 30 minutes on this day? We need it on this day because, as I mentioned, the designer will be rolling off to another project the day after. So we need it on that day. Their EA or that person will find time for you. And then, so first thing is actually have the product reviews. Second thing is be super well prepared on these product reviews. At Google, it was very common. People pulled all-nighters. They would stay up until 4 a.m. that they would go home for 2 hours and sleep from 4 to 6 so they have the product review, right? So just crush this product review. Each company is different. For me personally, I think the best product reviews have a decision. So what you do is you frame it at the very beginning for the executive. You say, hey, for this invite modal, we have 2 leading designs. We're going to show you how we got to these 2 leading designs out of the 10 we tested, the feedback we've gotten so far on the 2 leading designs. And out of this meeting, you're going to tell us which design for the invite modal we are going for. That's like a perfect framing. And then you do that and you share that with them, and then you take their decision and you move forward. Try to have some clear feedback where they influence the direction. It's not just like the worst is when, your user researcher gets up and for 15 minutes just summarizes all the user research you did. Like that's going to be a disastrous meeting. There should be 0 monologues, really make it a conversation with that executive. Executives, they have meetings all day. They hate them, right? Every meeting, especially if they're over Zoom, you just keep losing energy. But if your product review was the different, where they were talking, and now they're starting to feel good, where they had their hands back in product work, which they used to do 10 years ago, now they start to feel good. So product reviews is the second component. The third component, and this is, I mentioned a little bit, people are missing this. Either they're missing this or they're not getting it in front of the executive. Your executive is probably not reading all the emails you send to them. So figure out what are the times that they're actually listening. One of the most common is weekly business review. If you shipped a metric that improved activation rate supposedly by 30%, then when you graduate it, we should see that our normal 5% activation rate is now 6.5%, right? We should see that in the activation rate. So you should show them in weekly business review. Hey, here's a chart of activation rate, 5% up to 6.5 as we ramped, and now it's at 6.5. And with a big red arrow, we shipped this feature. That is the most convincing way to show executives that you made impact. So thinking really carefully about the meetings, the input sources that executives actually pay attention to and remember stuff from. And that's another insight that they can take back to their other execs, right? Hey guys, hope you noticed activation rate is up 30%. That was my team. So that's how I think about it.
Very well crafted, Akash. I think this is not about the word impact. Your presentation, your communication, how you're conveying the message to the leadership also plays a very important role in getting a buy-in. And especially with all the prep work which you mentioned, you're on the mind, and that's where you get the work done easily. Yeah, I think this was amazing insights. Akash, thank you so much for being part of this podcast and channel. I hope audience still watching, you found a lot of value out of this videos. Akash, before we wrap up the video, are there any final word of advice you want to share to the aspiring product managers or the existing product managers?
This is a great job, you guys. I see so many PMs on Reddit. I'm burnt out. I'm in a feature factory. Yes, maybe you are in a feature factory. Maybe you're in the 1 percentile of product practices. It's still an amazing job. What other job do you get to set the direction for 5 to 6 high-paid engineers and high-paid designers? There is no other job, really. Maybe founder, but you would have to raise the money to pay those people, which in the US is like $2 million a year. In India, it's still, a couple $100,000 a year. So almost like a crore per year in rupees, right? So it's an amazing job. You're able to make impact, even if you work in some random internal tool. You're making impact on all the developers, all the rest of the CS and marketing people who are using said internal tool. So I think step back, think about when you wanted to have this job and reframe. I want to see more subreddit product management posts of, gosh, I love my job. This is such a breath of fresh air to be able to make such big impact, Everybody here probably benefits from that feature on iOS where when you get a 2-factor authentication, it automatically pulls that code in from your message to put in the... How much of a positive impact did that PM have on the world? Funny enough, my brother knows the PM involved. That PM was 27 years old. How did a 27-year-old PM have such a positive impact on the whole world? It's only in this job, so enjoy it.
Folks, this is interesting. It has its own challenges, but I think every job has its own, right? And instead of looking at the negative side, let's look into more of a positive side and keep growing. Thank you again, folks, for watching in. See you until in the next videos.